Good.
Honestly, just like I'll take any excuse to.
Mm-hmm.
I'll just kind of like walk into the living room, and if no one's like doing anything in there, I'll just be like, so I've got to watch Lord of the Rings for the podcast, you guys. So I've got to do this.
Yeah. So then you got the TV.
So that I have the TV.
Yeah.
And I'm making it clear it's Blu-ray. I can't watch it in my room. And it's the extended edition. Yeah. We're watching the full extended edition. Yeah. And I'll pause if I have to, which means it will take all night.
Yeah.
So that way they know I'm business.
I've seen it a lot. This one, the most probably.
Nice.
I saw it 13 times in theaters. I'm a dork. So
I mean, like I'm like really into like Marvel and Harry Potter. Saw those all in theaters, saw premieres. Never seen any of them 13 times in theaters. I don't think I've seen anything more than once in theaters.
Yeah. There was a moment, I would say, I mean, let's be real. These movies were the height of cinema.
Yeah.
IMO. Like, I am just like, of course, like you have nothing but else to do. Let's go to the movies. Right. And it was back when the movies were like $6 or $7.
Affordable. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was like $30 for a ticket and then $30 for the small bag of popcorn you get.
Yeah. And then like, you know, church is out. What do you do with your friends? You go see Lord of the Rings. I mean, that's breakfast. A true story.
That's
like
fair.
I went with like the youth, like with like friends. And we would just like, oh, like, let's go again. And then you go with all these different groups of friends and then you just go all the time.
Yeah. I was very typical kind of Midwest after church. We all raced to whatever diner was closest and tried to get in before the other people at your same church.
Nice.
And everyone was like pretending we weren't racing each other.
Right.
Like you get them, you're like, oh, hi. Oh yeah, the wait's so long. We were so glad we got in early.
Yeah, it's like Black Friday, but you're like, but you're like nice.
Yeah, exactly. But like passive aggressive nice. Like,
yeah.
the way God intended.
Yeah.
But then I guess I worked at the restaurant in London and Sundays they did Sunday roast. And so I feel like I got kind of like a taste of what it could have been because I've never worked at a restaurant in the US and I don't ever intend to.
No, don't do it.
American customers were the worst that we would get there. But it was crazy on Sundays. I think restaurants in general are just always crazy on Sundays because it's like a day of leisure. And so people don't want to do anything for themselves.
Yeah. And it makes sense that Britain would, they kind of inherit more of the traditional aspect of church life than they do actual like doctrine. Like most people understand like Sunday dinner.
I don't know if that
Christmas
was such a thing,
dinner.
Though.
But I mean, it's like more part of their culture of like Sundays being like, like the day of rest. And then like, cause we, like in my family, it was all about like Sunday dinner. My grandma would put the roast in before we left for church. And then we'd come back and have like a big thing.
I don't know how much of it was like a post-church thing though, is what I mean. Like it wasn't
no,
so much
I know, like if you don't go to church, but it's like, there's this like culture around but you have to go to someone's,
you got to do something community.
You got to do something.
If you don't have a meal. You got to do,
And my parents, like, they call it dinner, but it's like 2:00 or 3, like Sunday, because it's Sunday dinner, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Okay. So, what are we talking about today?
We're talking about The Return of the King, the movie.
Yes. Such a good one.
Is this your favorite?
No, number 2 is.
Oh, that's right.
Because of Helm's Deep. Last March of the Ents.
Yeah.
I will entirely backtrack and talk all about that again.
Yeah.
But no, this is such a strong movie. This on its own could be a movie.
Mm-hmm.
because the plot is so like succinct.
Mm-hmm.
It has like a full arc. Like the other ones don't necessarily. Like the other ones have like subplots that are like the main plot of the story.
Mm-hmm.
I guess like the main arc. Whereas like this one, it is like what we've been wanting. It's what we've been waiting for.
Right.
What about you? What about you?
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely, it felt like much more like we're here, you know?
Yeah.
Like that, it kind of just felt very cerebral. Like it was just much more like, I feel like the editing was a lot more like direct and like unabashed. Like I feel like the first two are a little bit more like the first one's like expository, like we've kind of talked about that, and so you have to kind of spend a lot of time observing and letting things kind of linger. And then the Two Towers is just essentially kind of a waiting game. And then the Return of the King, just pacing wise, just felt like, okay, here's like who Smeagol was. Here's like literally like the within the first like 3 or 4 scenes is like the fall of Faramir or something. Like it's just like really fast of just like
they're like we gotta wrap up a lot of bullshit. There's so many different like storylines that are happening. I do find some of the editing to be questionable in this one, which I think is why it's not my favorite. Because like the scene where they find Eowyn and then they're crying over her, and then it cuts to her being healed by Aragorn, and then it cuts to her meeting Faramir after he's watched her a little bit, and then it cuts to them like on the balcony. That all has like a sense that like a lot of time is passing. And then it just kind of like jumps back to what is essentially the same night. And Pippin finds Merry.
And
that like there's certain parts that are edited like that, like the ending. I'm very much on board of like shitting on the ending where it's like fade out, we're back, fade out, and 3 years later, and then fade out. Like I can't with that. That being said, like the story itself is so much more succinct.
Well, and you get honestly too, like, cause I was thinking like with Pippin, like he almost gets like a second arc. Cause like him and Merry like kind of did their thing with like Treebeard in the last movie. But he becomes like kind of a bigger role. I feel like a more interesting role because of the, what is it called? The Sand-Tier or the Pan-Tier? Palantir. Yeah. Sorry.
No, you're good.
And like, that's like it looks like a really huge threat that like he just like can't help himself but like grab out of Gandalf's grasp, and then like you think he's just gonna like die, and you're like, oh my gosh, like
I feel like they had maturing to do still, which they definitely did in the third one.
So it was like a good way of kind of picking them up again, because like then Merry goes to war with alongside Eowyn, and nothing much changes with Frodo and Sam.
So I don't feel it quite as much in number 2, but this is the one where I'm like, I really like, can we just fast forward through this part?
Can we just get to Shelob?
Exactly. Like the first half of the movie, all of their scenes are just like the same thing. It feels like. But okay. So speaking of arcs, this is actually a great kind of segue into one of my notes. I do have notes this time. We're out of printer ink. So they are printed instead, or they are like on my computer instead of printed. So bear with me a little bit.
Good.
So I do want to talk about Aragorn, who is like the star of this movie. Technically, I mean, it's about him. The title is about him.
Yes.
So I guess just to kind of start, Are you familiar with Joseph Campbell and the hero's journey? Okay. So Aragorn is the hero in this situation, but he kind of does the hero's journey like effectively twice, because it happens over the full trilogy, but it also happens in like a mini version just in Return of the King. Because like some of the key, I guess, events within, because you'll get like character tropes within like the hero's journey, because you'll get like the sidekicks and all that kind of stuff. But like one of the key points is the trip into the underworld. The like refusal of their own fate, their own destiny, into like something causing them to accept it, which somehow will possibly lead into like the underworld, or like somehow or another, like an underworld trip is going to follow that acceptance, and then coming out and like the full circle of like, once they go through the underworld, coming out on top as the king. And I think he does that through like the full trilogy, kind of figuratively.
Yeah.
That underworld trip. But then he does it very literally in Return of the King, like Tolkien's being like, if you're not seeing it, he is the hero of this story.
Yeah. In
case you haven't picked up on it yet, because he goes into what is effectively an underworld when he goes to the mountains, where the traitors' souls still reside. And it's got like the skulls in the wall, and like when they try to scare them away, they like cause an avalanche of their own skulls and everything. And then they come out of the underworld, and these souls are answering to their new king. And so I love that, like, we get to see kind of like a double duty of that. Just again, to just kind of be like, in case you're not aware.
Well, so what is the underworld part in the full arc of the 3 movies?
So that's the one that I said was kind of like more figurative. And so you've got kind of like, he is being forced into the role of leader after Gandalf dies, because almost immediately after Gandalf dies, then Boromir does as well. And so anybody else, like the fellowship is like effectively broken up. And so he's being forced to take on this leadership position, which he's not entirely comfortable with, because he doesn't want to be recognized as king. But then in number 2, which is essentially like where that would have happened, is when he's being like, we get the line where Legolas in Elvish is like, these people are going to die. And he's just like, then I'll die as one of them. He's so willing to just like, he knows that it's the end, or he thinks like all arrows are pointing to this being their kind of their last stand. And so I think that moment of like accepting the end, it's almost like suicidal last run in an attempt to defeat Saruman.
And reject his purpose. Because part of the hero's journey is you have to reject where you're supposed to go.
There's like the rejection, which leads to the acceptance. And so that's why like Helm's Deep is kind of that underworld experience for him, because it's at the end of the battle when I think we talked about this, where like Gamling, like Theoden is pretty much like, this is the end. And Gamling is like, fuck, and turns to Aragorn, is like, what do we do? Right. And Aragorn answers. Aragorn gives a response, because in that moment, he's just being the king. Yeah. Without realizing it, he's accepted that role. Yeah. And then I hadn't realized this until this latest watch, but okay. Oh shoot, what's his name?
Which one?
The elf dad.
Daddy elf?
Daddy elf. Yes. Elrond, thank you. I think we've done this almost every time. Daddy elf? Happens.
Oh, yes.
Only Daddy happens elf when we're on this. Yeah. He is. Is that like he wasn't necessarily a supporter of Aragorn as king. Not that he didn't believe in him, but that I think he didn't believe that Aragorn believed enough to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's after Arwen decides to like stay back and get rid of the light of the Eldar. She's like, there's no choice. She has to stay behind for him now. That Elrond is like, well, fuck. I've got to take this like washed up man that my daughter is in love with and give him like a full-time job. He can't do this like part-time shit anymore. Like very much just making sure that his daughter is set up for a successful future. And so that's when he decides to like reforge the sword, and he like shows up on the eve of battle, and he's like, accept your role as king, go into those mountains, get all those souls out. And I find that hilarious because it was just like it was like kind of just like this last ditch effort to make sure that Arwen would be okay. Yeah. More than anything. So.
Okay, I have a thought on that, but I'm freezing, so I'm going to grab a sweater.
Okay.
And then take up where you left off there. Done. Okay. Nice thick. Nice and thick. That's actually like one of my I'm like clothed all of a sudden.
That's you were actually such a slut before.
I know. Yes. My default. I think that's one of my favorite scenes visually.
Which one?
The scenes you're talking about. So Elrond, who you think is going to be Arwen, comes cloaked in like the horse, and they go up that like he goes scales up, and then you're thinking like, how
did a whole ass army get up there?
Well, it's because that's just where like the king goes. Yeah, but it's still like
there's still like it's like the king and his entourage.
Yeah. The king and the king's men.
I saw that part, and every single time I see it, I'm just like, no, absolutely not. I would refuse. I would stay on the ground where it's safe, where God intended.
But it's really cool. It's like pretty and stuff. And then just like, it's so like exciting when Aragorn, Gimli, and Legolas like go into the crack. And you're like, fuck, what's going to be back there? Like, it's like, because usually when you're like, oh, you in a story where you have to like go into like this dark, dingy like hole, you know, that's like whispering at you and stuff. Like it seems kind of like, oh, please don't go there. But I kind of wanted them to. And I was like, what are they going to find? I think too, it's because you really were craving an adventure for the three of them to go on.
Yes.
Because the last movie, they were just running the whole time.
Well, and like once their plot starts is after they meet back up with like Gandalf. So they don't really like the three on their own have a lot of action together, but they don't really have like time together. Mm-hmm. If that makes sense. Like you can see their like brotherly love in battle. Yeah. But you can't see it in like just kind of like more mundane actions because we don't get a lot of them. Yeah. And so I like that we have that moment. Yeah. I get so frustrated with, I think it is gambling. He like, as they're walking into the mountain, he's like, see, even they see it's a hopeless endeavor. Like we're all going to die. And it's like, just think for like 30 seconds, just like straight up, like 30 seconds. They single-handedly turned the battle at Helm's Deep in your favor. If they're leaving right now, they're probably doing it for a good reason. Yeah. And that's why women more often than not in the story are like the catalyst for hope. Right. Not the men. Like the men don't even have it without the women.
Yeah.
So
I think it was Aemir. He's the nephew.
are you okay?
Because he has more roles than Gamling, I think.
Yeah, no, he does, but like I don't find him very interesting.
I like him. I think he's kind of cute.
I think Gamling's lines usually just like sit with me a little bit like deeper.
Yeah.
In terms of, I like,
just like
interaction.
I like Aemir because he's the leader of the Rohirrim.
Yeah.
And he like goes rogue. I think that's kind of interesting.
Well, yeah, especially after Grima's bullshit.
Yeah.
I did want to touch back on something real quick. So if you're cool with it, because we're definitely going to get back to this, because again, Aragorn's the star of the show.
Yeah, you're fine.
But when everyone who was at Helm's Deep shows up to Isengard, so last time we had gotten to the discussion about like climate and industrialism, and then also if the Ents had actually interacted in those early scenes with anyone other than like
hobbits and Gandalf.
Yes.
Or wizards, I guess.
Yes, wizards. So they don't.
Right. Because he talks to Saruman, Gandalf, and the hobbits.
Yeah, and he mentions talking to Saruman. And then even then, so like on top of that as well, it doesn't seem quite like anyone else in the group is fully understanding what's happening. Like they don't seem engaged in the conversation. They're just kind of like letting it happen.
Well, it's kind of like those moments when they kind of let Gandalf do his wizardy thing and they're just kind of like
exactly
like that's what's going on. Like he's talking to the tree and they're like, oh, Gandalf, like
they're really only hearing like one side of the conversation.
Yeah.
No, so I found that really, again, like going back to that conversation about kind of like the hobbits and the wizards being closer to nature, very interesting.
So they just heard like rumbling trees.
Just heard, creaking and
that's cool.
But also something I'd never really noticed before is that the death of Grima and Saruman heavily like foreshadows Smeagol's end.
Ooh, yeah.
Because you get this like this agent of the evil being the one responsible for his death.
Yeah.
Which kind of got me into thinking about, because, well, I can start a full sentence.
Yes.
It got me thinking about the role that like Smeagol plays, and then the kind of continuous question as the Lord of the Rings has existed about, are we meant to feel sorry for him? Like what are we meant to feel towards Smeagol, towards Grima?
Yeah.
Because in Grima's last moments, like Theoden is yelling down from the ground and he's saying like, you're still a man of Rohan. You were before all of this. We'll take you back. Yeah. And Grima wants it. You can see how he wants to return to that. But then Saruman like turns around and he starts doing the kind of like the bad inner voices that are like, no, you're worthless. You're bullshit. Like they don't want you. They're lying, that kind of shit.
Yeah.
Which leads to Grima stabbing him and pushing him off the tower.
Yeah.
And so I do find it interesting that these very, very clearly evil characters are given this second, or I guess third dimension of sorrow.
Yeah, like they're given like a last word. Yeah.
Especially because Peter Jackson like started this one out with the backstory on Smeagol. So he's afforded a lot of personhood just before we're seeing Grima given a little bit more depth. And so you got to look at like what purpose was that opening scene serving for what is essentially like Smeagol's evilest movie.
Yeah. So this was kind of like during my reading of like Frankenstein, I've just been like obsessed with like this theme of like when you have like in the case of like Lord of the Rings, you have like good and evil. It's just like this very powerful like dichotomy that's happening. It's like very like obvious one. And like it's almost like the stronger the evil, the stronger the good, because it has to like meet. So you have like and that's kind of what like uplifts us with this like tale, is that you have like these incredibly like overwhelming odds, and then you have like these, you know, two itty bitty hobbits like destroying like this incredibly evil thing. And it's like and you just like think about all of the shit Sam had to go through, all of like the kind of strength you have to have, right? Like, I mean, we all know Sam's like amazing, and it's like, and then you have like this like incredibly like evil little minion Smeagol.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like kind of watching how something can grow, right? Like that first scene, like how something can like grow so evil. Because even then, like he hadn't even had the ring. Like they just found it, and then
it was just like the what is it, like the temptation of it that caused him to kill his own friend.
Yeah. So then it makes you start to think like it's in him then. So there's like bad seeds, which is maybe that's the moral of that story. But I kind of like that theme of like, it's like the good has to kind of meet the evil. The evil has to kind of meet the good.
The thing that stands out the most for the good to me in this whole situation is like the birth of Gandalf the White. So he fell, and not that he's weak or anything, but he fell less powerful, and he emerges in like this very Christ-like metaphor.
It's definitely
exactly.
This is like Aslan coming back from the dead. I mean, it's
exactly. And so he comes back, this like Christ-like figure in this time of darkness. And then what I think what I also like about it is that, like you said, like it is a very clear cut, like good versus evil. But then on like the micro level, it's not as clear.
Right.
Because even think about like the visuals of Gondor versus Mordor. You have like dark and stormy, and like they literally keep the clouds around. And then Gondor is just like this like pearly, gorgeous marble. Yeah, like fluorescent white stone. And so like the visuals themselves are already kind of like evoking that. And so I do like, because like Denethor is the worst, absolutely the worst, but he's the leader of what is essentially the good side right now in this kind of like literal mirror. But also, I guess like the third also, the problem with the evil growing is, I guess, like loyalty. When you get the extended scenes of Sam and Frodo going through Mordor, and they like get caught up in the like slew of orcs trying to go to meet the armies, it's very easy for them to start fights. They pretty much just have to like pretend to fight each other, and then everyone's in a brawl. And so I think like those little things, while funny, are also like, here's why it's so easy for Grima and Smeagol to end these things, because they're not thinking about the greater good. They're just thinking about their own pockets.
Yeah.
They're thinking about like their own satisfaction.
Yeah. And I think like even just the very introduction of the first film, when Galadriel kind of introduces you to all the races, right? So you have like elves who are like more like cerebral and interested in knowledge, and I don't know, beautiful things.
Yeah.
Which it seems like.
Yeah.
And then you have like dwarves who kind of keep to themselves and mine and get rich and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then, but they're like strong and stuff like that. But then you have men who are like kind of in the middle, and they don't have what distinguishes them from other races is that they crave power.
Yeah.
That's literally their own, like their most unique thing.
Yeah.
And so then I think power is the evil. Like the ring is power. The power is ring. Like,
yeah.
And so you have, so it is kind of interesting that you have like men are the ones that are so easily corrupted. And so then you're like, well, Aragorn's the only like good man, but he's also elven. So
yeah, exactly.
It's probably because he's elven. Like,
yeah. That does bring me to another one of my Aragorn points, which is like his symbol as like the divine right of kings, because the elves are like kind of this angelic race kind of. And so he comes from a line that is fused with elven blood. And it's been so long. And so you think like, oh, he might be the last one, but no. He marries an elf, and we know he's going to have a son with that elf. And so he's also going to start a new line of divine. It's the last one because she's the last elf in Middle Earth.
Yeah.
So I like that I like that he used that.
Yeah.
That he was still kind of like conscious of those monarchical.
Yeah.
I guess propaganda.
yeah.
Yeah. But he made us fall for it. So
yes.
I love that.
How
Aragorn's
convenient.
yeah. The kiss that he gives her at the very end. He just goes in tongue first. Oh. I screamed when it happened. I forget every time how aggressive he goes. I can understand why you saw it 13 times as a kid.
Yeah.
Because that kiss made my mouth water.
Yeah.
It's so good.
Quick side note. We should do one of these Film Fridays on like best kisses in film.
Yes.
Because remember when I was just thinking about this the other day. I sent you a YouTube clip when we were like in London, and I was like, Melissa will appreciate this. And I was like, because that's what we did. We were like, oh, I'm really horny. Have you seen this kiss? I like find it on YouTube.
Yeah.
And I sent it to you, and it's from Far From the Madding Crowd. And I don't know their names. I don't know people's names, but it was just at the end, and he just went. It was just like there was it was a very charged scene. So yes, we should, and then we could play clips of them.
I'm down. I think you should just for science should play the Vigo kiss for this one.
Yes, I should. Should I watch it right now? And then we can like have my reaction or whatever be like the end of the clip. Okay.
I think you should share your screen as well.
Oh yeah. Let's try that. Let's see if it works.
Yeah. So that way, if anything, I can also see it.
Yes. We can watch it together.
Oh, this is the full coronation scene.
Yeah. Is that okay?
Yeah. It's like 5 minutes though.
Okay. Oh yeah.
Yeah. Because we get like you need the lead in, you need the,
Daddy Elrond. Daddy Elf. Sorry.
You're fine. He's finally just like giving permission.
Oh yeah. He dove right in.
That tongue. I think because like in movies, they don't normally pull out the tongue, especially in like court movies.
Yeah.
Where it's like all regal and like it's a coronation. It's just like a pretty, even if it's like a makeout.
Like everyone's watching. Her dad's standing right there.
Her dad is literally like max 4 feet away at this point.
Yeah.
And he really, I mean, I gotta give it to him because I really wish he could give it to me. So
yeah.
It's a good, yeah.
Yeah, that's good. I like it.
Yep.
Where were we?
So, I mean, pretty much just like the divine right of kings. I like that they kind of incorporate that because we're getting like the end of the age of magic, essentially. The age of man has started. The elves are leaving. Hobbits are like at this point pretty much mythologized, and dwarves live underground.
Right.
And so like we're entering...
Which, as we've seen with Moria, are becoming extinct. Yeah,
exactly. And so it kind of does this thing that like fairy tales can sometimes do, where like the mood, the setting of it is this vague time before. So that like magic was real. We don't live with magic now, but it was real. And so I like that Tolkien kind of pulls from that, but he's like, see, there's still magic in the world. It's just not what it once was.
Yeah. That's an interesting concept that I'm also learning with like Shadow and the Embers, like, or the Flesh and Fire series generally is like the way that magic kind of ebbs and flows with whoever's powerful and whoever just kind of goes away and goes to sleep, you know?
Right.
Back. Really interesting.
But yeah, I love Aragorn's story throughout this.
Yeah.
Okay. I've talked a lot. So
oh no, I'm sorry.
No, you're good. No, I'm apologizing. Don't say sorry to me.
No, I mean, I feel like, I didn't watch it because I was like, I've seen it so many times, but and I read the wiki, so trying to think. Actually, to be perfectly honest, not a lot happens in this movie.
Yeah, it's a lot of resolutions.
It's a lot of resolutions of a story we already know, and it's just kind of like, you know, the last 30 minutes of the film is just them all going home.
Yeah.
Like
so many fades.
There's, I would say, I think you kind of hit it on the nose with Aragorn's arc. But as for anyone else, and like kind of the Hobbits a little bit, but like anyone else, like it's just kind of.
Do you want to jump back to Isengard a little bit?
Yes.
One of another like small detail thing that I hadn't noticed before, or that I guess I hadn't thought about before, is the moment when Gandalf says your staff is broken after Saruman like failed to shoot him. Like that's a moment when we really see the power of Gandalf, because what, at least in like Jackson's version in the movie, so I can't speak to the book, essentially what happens is that he just speaks it into being. He speaks it into reality because he says it, and then Saruman's staff explodes. So kind of, I guess, again, going back to your point about like the really distinct line between good and evil, and then Gandalf rising as the new wizard of the White Wizard. He is more powerful than Saruman.
Oh yeah. Well, because Saruman relinquished his right to be the White Wizard.
Yeah. But he was still powerful.
Yeah, because he was getting his power from Sauron.
Yeah. So you see that like that's not enough.
Yeah.
Not that Gandalf has it easy, but like very early on, this kind of like inkling of Sauron is not shit against Gandalf.
Yeah.
And then, so in the a mirror again from movie 2, when Sauron talks about, like, he's got that long monologue about industrialization and ruining all of the trees and everything. One of the last lines that Treebeard has is saying, "The filth of Saruman is washing away, and the trees will come back." And that's just really sweet. It's really, it's very lovely response to what happened in number 2.
It's very lovely.
It is.
Yeah.
It's hopeful.
Yeah.
It's hopeful. Like, you have this sense of rebirth.
Yeah.
Of like the things are going to come back afterwards.
Earlier you were talking about how, unless you had more to.
No, that was pretty much it.
Earlier you were talking about kind of the foreshadowing of Gollum's death with Grima and Saruman. Also Denethor.
Yes.
He literally runs on fire towards on the rock, literally running towards Mordor off the cliff. But I also wanted to talk a little bit about Pippin.
Yeah.
Because later in the film, I forget that he becomes like Denethor's little like bitch. But you know what I mean? Like
he immediately like sells his body to him. Like Gandalf is like, just don't speak. And he is like, I'm going to speak. I'm actually going to sell my life to him. So have fun with that.
Yeah. Pippin gets his song.
Yeah.
Thing. That's always the good part. It brings you like shivers in the theater, you know? And it just like, he has such a good voice and it's such a haunting tune. I thought it was really well done. And then I think I realized something, that Pippin kind of becomes us. He becomes kind of the spectator. And we actually see things through his point of view a lot. Especially when in the middle of the battle and him and Gandalf are on the next kind of like the throne room. I mean, the orcs and stuff are coming up and they're in the middle of the battle. And then they have that moment where like, you know, everything stops and Gandalf and Pippin's just like
talking about death.
Yeah. And like, the song comes on and it's like, you're Pippin. And like Gandalf, God, Jesus is telling you like, da, da, da. Like, it's just like this, like
death is just the next step.
Yeah.
And like Pippin, who up until this point has been like immature, like not, I don't say that in a negative way. He's just like, he's a kid, essentially. He's the youngest of them all too. He's pretty much a teenager in like Hobbit years. He just accepts death, which is crazy to think about. But that's like one of those moments where, like you were saying earlier, like we get this almost like second arc with Merry and Pippin. Because the first one was just them realizing the stakes. The second one is them letting it settle, letting it absorb, seeing them, not just like standing atop an Ent and throwing rocks at orcs.
Yeah.
But like fighting with swords and killing people
on the ground. Yeah.
I also, because I like that Gandalf changes his tune towards Pippin in this one.
Yes.
Because I do get why he was
That's actually really sweet. Like
it is.
Development as well. Yeah, I agree.
And I think that's one of
because he's really harsh on him in the beginning,
maturing. Yeah. Because Gandalf can see that like it wasn't helping.
Yeah.
No, I love him in this movie.
Yeah. Well, this one has a few lines as well. This has the "What say you?"
Yeah.
Which I love. That fucking scene is good because I mean, how many times does Aragorn like raise his voice? Not very often. Only when he's being king.
Yes. King Aragorn does raise his voice. This also has the "and Rohan will answer," which every time he says it, like, I tear, I cry, because it's like it brings up the same kind of like, I can't, like, overwhelmingness, if that's a word, that like I get
the sublime.
a little bit. Like I'm so excited. I'm so like in a viewer, like definitely as a viewer, I would not be excited if I was really going into battle, but the prospect of like what's to come now of his firmness in their treaty.
Yeah.
Oh, and then Gimli has the line, and I don't know how like viral this is, but it's a good one where he's like, just walk into Mordor, certainty of death. When do we go? Like, yeah.
He's just like so ready to accept. I also love that they, I mean, I think it does happen in the books, but it kind of visually hints at the future of Gimli and Legolas when they arrive on the ship. Like they arrive on the boat and it's just them and all the orcs are just like, and then the fucking dead come out.
Yes.
And just like swarm. But like, it's just kind of nice to, like for the book lovers to actually see that and be and like see Gimli and Legolas like on a boat, because they like go on a boat after this and like go on adventures and stuff. So I'm glad that they got to have that, because they don't get a lot of closure.
No, they're kind of just like, we see them at the very end after Frodo wakes up, and then just as like a fellowship context. Yeah, 100%. They're like side characters I'd like to have more content of.
There's the book that you want written.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep. Right.
Another like theme that we'd been talking about with hope. There's a line that Gandalf says. I wish I'd like had the context for it, but Gandalf does say at one point there was never much hope. And I find that interesting, because it's not that like he's not trying, but whereas like when we've talked about Arwen and Eowyn talking about like there's always hope. You can't give up hope. And that's what keeps them going. That's what like drives Arwen to stay, is this hope for a future with a son that she's just seen. And then Eowyn with the hope of like the success of Rohan and the success of our people. But Gandalf says there was never much hope. So like it's kind of inverted way of looking at it as opposed to the women do. Like I think it is definitely like hammering in that point of the men are not capable of hope on their own. Right. Aragorn gets it when he realized, or I guess I don't even know if I would call it hope, but he gets this kind of like second wind when he finds out that Arwen's dying. Yeah. That's what he's fighting for. Yeah. So it's not hope, it's just desperation that the love of his life doesn't die.
Well, and there's the sense that like he was willing to say goodbye to her and her go to the next land and live without her. But the moment that she chooses to stay and die, that's like, that puts the fire under his butt, like you said. Yeah. Like, I think that's interesting because it's like, he doesn't want to cause her suffering. Yeah. But she doesn't want to cause him suffering by leaving.
Yeah, exactly.
Very sweet.
Yeah, it is. It is. But it is very much like the women become the driving force for these kings, because you've got Eowyn, like not maybe not as aggressively as Arwen does for Aragorn, but Eowyn becomes this kind of beacon for Theoden, especially because like his son had just died.
Mm-hmm.
And he doesn't know that she's going. So he's like, in my stead, you will rule our people.
Right.
Knowing full well he's likely not going to come back.
Mm-hmm.
And so I feel like they do become I think I said, like, these beacons for them.
Mm-hmm.
This thing to fight for. Even Sam on like his deathbed, what should be his deathbed, talks about Rosie.
Yeah.
Because that's what's getting him to go home.
Oh, Sam.
Yeah.
One more step and it'll be the farthest I've ever been from home.
Sean
farthest
Astin
from home I've ever been.
does such a good accent.
Yeah.
He's got such like a good voice for Sam.
Yeah.
I love it so much.
It's very warm. Yeah, he's a good Sam.
Yes.
I love that he became like Sam and Aragorn are the heroes of this story.
Yes, they are.
Yeah.
They really are.
Yeah. On the topic of like women and hope, it makes, because I think the last episode we were very much kind of, I don't think we said our disappointment, but I think it's kind of implied that there's just not very great women roles.
Yes.
And
even adding like twice as much screen time as Arwen has in like screen time in the books. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Still,
and even
just like,
and even Eowyn being kind of like this, like,
yeah,
still was
she's like
kind of
really
lacking.
Really seeking the daddy,
Yeah. I think we can safely say that it was very much a war story.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of the the thoughts and all, and like the soldiers' minds is always like mother and girlfriend and wife, right?
Yeah.
And Tolkien having fought in the World War I, right?
I think so, yeah.
So it makes sense that that's kind of the representation.
I'm gonna Google that real
women
quick.
Get. Yeah, because he wrote them in the 40s. I think he wrote these in like the 40s or the 30s and 40s.
Yeah, it was World War I. Yeah, it's like people generally talk about how like Lord of the Rings is very much a kind of like literary vomiting of his experiences in war.
Mm-hmm.
With the battles and with the camaraderie and the brotherhoods that like are born in those battles. But then there are like the little things like Sam and Frodo on Mount Doom, which has erupted, talking about the strawberries that they get and the barley that the barley beer that they would drink together at the Green Dragon, and just those little things that are meant to bring you home before you die.
Mm-hmm.
Like little moments like that are definitely weighted, I think is like what I'm going for.
Yeah. Yeah. It anchors you.
Yeah.
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 And then like another reminder too of what they were fighting for. They both admit that they're not, like, I think it's both times, or both of them, I think, is in this movie where they say, I don't think there's going to be a return journey for me.
Mm-hmm.
First Frodo, obviously, and then when they get closer, Sam is pretty much like, I don't think there is going to be a back for me. And so they've already accepted that they're never going to see what they were fighting for again, which is depressing.
Yeah.
Terrifying. But they keep on trucking.
Yeah.
Because that's what
they gotta save the
good guys do. Yeah.
Yeah. Definitely. Do you have arachnophobia?
Oh God, yeah. It's taken me many years to be able to watch that scene without covering my face.
Yeah.
It's bad. I mean, like, it's a good scene. It's not like a bad scene. It's just bad for my like sleep cycle.
Yeah. I feel like too, like all of the, like you were saying, like all of the drama that happens like in Mordor when they're like kind of going through and stuff is very just like to kind of keep us gripped.
Yeah.
Like a lot of it, I don't even know is in the book, like where they have.
I think there's actually maybe more when they have to.
Yeah, there's probably more in the books.
Yeah.
But nothing like memorable because it's like they're gonna get there eventually, right? Like we all know it's gonna happen. So everything that kind of happens in between is. Did you ever have that thought too? But now I kind of understand. Like now I know why. Because like at the end, and they're sitting on the rock, and Mount Doom is erupting, and the eye is like destroyed, and like the earth is quaking, and they're on the rock, and then the eagles come, and you're like, why didn't the eagles take them? But it's because of the
yeah.
Yeah, the Nazgul.
Okay.
And here's my
problem. Okay, I understand why they didn't take the ring.
Yeah.
My problem is like, why were they not still in every other single battle? Because they could have turned the tides. Yeah, they could have turned the tides when they were fighting Gondor because the Nazgul show up and take out every single one of their catapults. The Eagles should have come in and done the same exact thing, should have started taking out the cave trolls. The Eagles could have come in when they were trying to do just like distract the eye. The Eagles could have easily helped and the people wouldn't have actually died for a diversion.
Remind me in The Hobbit, because you get the most of the eagles in The Hobbit, correct?
Yeah.
What is their temperament? I always kind of had this idea that they were like very hard to like get on your side and they're just kind of like grumpy and
I get the sense of like grumpy and
apathetic.
Apathetic. Yeah, not necessarily that they're like actively not trying to be on your side, but that they're like they're just kind of like
they're just like, well, what do I like
what does that have to do with me?
Kind of like the elves, some of the elves.
Yeah. Another kind of thing with like the Ents where it's like nature is just kind of like
I kind of like that though.
Sounds tough. Sounds like a you problem.
Yeah. Until it affects them, right?
Mm-hmm. Until like man saves the day and then they're like, oh, we'll go pick up the hobbits. Don't even worry about it.
But I feel like the Eagles, really the only thing they do is they get Gandalf off of Isengard.
Yep.
And they retrieve.
Yeah.
That's their job. They're
golden retrievers with wings. Literally
golden retrievers with wings.
Yeah.
And they kind of do Gandalf's bidding, but it seems like they have like a deal. Like maybe they owe Gandalf.
I think they just really like Gandalf. That's the sense that I get.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think he would even deign to make them owe him. I think it's just that like, well, it's going back again to him earning the title of the White Wizard.
Mm-hmm.
Is that he's always had like this good relationship with nature.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that goes into it as well, is like he didn't get the title and then later have to like swear the oath. He was already doing the job. They just gave him the promotion.
Yeah. Do you remember from the Silmarillion? Like what is...
I never read the Silmarillion.
Oh, you didn't? Okay.
I've got Google though.
No, that's fine. I was just curious, like if you got the impression that there was characteristics to each of the wizards, not the person, but the title. So you have like the white wizard, the gray wizard, and then the brown wizard. And Radagast seems to be, he was like the one that was in the woods.
Yeah.
He kind of like falls off and isn't really like in this series, but like what used to be like a much bigger role in Middle Earth. And then Gandalf, like I'm just interested if there's like any more like exposition about like what the colors and the titles
I'm sure there is.
are.
Let's see. That I can Google. Let's see here.
Because it seemed that the White Wizard was the most powerful. I do remember that. The White Wizard is supposed to be the most powerful.
Okay, so I'll share my screen.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, you gotta enable it.
Fuck me. Okay.
Okay. Okay, so wizards are powerful angelic beings who took the form of men to intervene in the affairs of Middle Earth in the Third Age. Let's see here.
What is Servants of the Valar?
I think the Valar.
Oh, they each served a Vale in some way.
Mm-hmm.
Saruman was the servant helper of. Okay, so
yes.
Oh, that's just Saruman himself. Mechanics and metalworking. That makes sense.
And then Gandalf was a servant of Manwë or Varda. And let's see here.
Lover of the gardens of Lorien. Hopes and dreams of men and elves. Radagast, servant of Yavanna, loved the things of nature, both animals and plants.
Cool. So they do kind of. I think the colors
I don't think
themselves,
it's like linked. I don't think it's like a position you and I think that was a special case where Gandalf took the role of White Wizard, but
I think
the White Wizard was the White Wizard was developed by Saruman. Like Saruman was the White Wizard.
Yeah.
And so it's not like the role that gives you the, it's,
If anyone knows, please comment below.
Yeah.
Because the most recent we've engaged with it has been the movies, which don't give all of the background, even though there are 9 hours in total. 9-ish, 9.5, 11.
But I think it would be safe to say that it was it was like Radagast who informed what the Brown Wizard was, as well as Gandalf informed, right? Because of their
because they're the only other ones that have done this.
Yeah. Okay. This is just interesting. Another big mystery is, where do orcs come from? How do you spawn orcs? That
we see it kind of. Oh, I guess he's an Urukai. In number 2, where he's like, it's like the.
But something has to. Background. But what?
Yeah.
Like.
Okay, so for the longest time, I thought that they were corrupted elves was like canon, but I recently found out that that's actually just like headcanon that like the fandom generally has just come to accept. So I don't know where orcs come from. I don't think, from what I had read like the other day, it doesn't look like Tolkien actually
explored that too much.
Or like confirmed. If he did explore it, he didn't confirm it officially.
Yeah.
Which is funny.
Yeah.
Because we have very clear details about where most of the other beings came from.
Yeah, exactly. Well, final thoughts?
I need to plan my next rewatch, but
yeah. Our next marathon.
Yeah. There are so many thoughts, but like,
it's a hard, I think this one's a hard one to talk about.
Yeah.
Because it's just like, there's not really much to explore because it's already been explored. That's kind of the point of it's the resolution.
Yeah.
And so there's not much explanation that goes into the literal return of the king.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, he's the king. The ring is destroyed. They all go home. There's that really long ending. And they slow-mo, like, jump on the bed.
Yeah. And then I don't know if Frodo actually ever knew Legolas's name.
Yeah.
I like the sword as like the symbol of Isildur's line. Like his like successors.
Oh, yeah.
Because it breaks. He's no longer king. And then they reforge it and his heir is brought back to the throne. So I do like that. I love like the symbolism around Aragorn, I think is what my final thought is.
Yeah. I do remember crying like every time when they go into Valinor on the ships.
Yeah.
God, it takes me back to being 15 again.
Well, everyone leaves. Like they're just like, bye hobbits, have fun walking like 4,000 miles home.
Yeah, they just take off into a Turner painting. Like
Yep. Yep. And I think what hurts worse is that like Gandalf leaves.
Yeah. I'm like, you just became white.
And now like Wizard. You've been, what is it, 3.5 years? That's it? That's all you're gonna do?
Yeah, but it makes sense with what we just read that he was like to support men, and he did that, and he got Aragorn where he needed to go. So I'm also sad that like Legolas and Aragorn aren't gonna like be like Legolas isn't gonna be like his advisor.
Yeah,
because they're like a good pair too.
And I'm gonna double check this real quick, just real quick. So I thought so. And so that's why I want to double check it. Pippin goes back to Gondor. Yeah. And he lives out his days there. And I love that ending for him. Like the same way like Sam getting a family. He's got Rosie. They've got their kids. Perfect ending for Sam. That's what he wanted. He wanted that quiet Shire life. Pippin wanted politics. He wanted knowledge. He was curious. Mm-hmm. He wanted more than the Shire. And so I love that he spends the rest of his days in Gondor.
I think Merry goes back to the Shire too, and he becomes like a general in the wars there.
I think he does, yeah. Let me double check that one real quick.
I mean, him, Sam, and Frodo all do for like a couple of years. Mm-hmm. Now I just have the Enya song in my head.
Yeah, so Pippin for a while becomes the Vane of the Shire. Mm-hmm. Well, Merry became the Master of Buckland, which makes sense. He was kind of like the one of higher standing between the two. After some years passed, they both left to stand by King Éomer in his last days. Merry died in Rohan while Pippin died in Gondor sometimes afterwards. Oh God, are you ready for this? You ready? When Aragorn died, they were laid to rest beside him.
Oh no! Oh no! Oh, that's sweet though.
I know, I'm crying sweet tears.
There's always hope.
Yeah. So our PPS final thoughts.
Yeah.
Kind of again, because I like that we kind of stayed away from talking about this as like Tolkien's war memorial to World War I.
Right.
But you can't like avoid that conversation. So if you look at the four hobbits as kind of these archetypes of men returned from war, you've got Frodo, who's just never the same, and who's Float, who's like quest like last adventure into the lands of the Undying, could be viewed as like a suicide. He just accepts death and leaves his friends and his family. And then you've got Sam, who throws himself into his family because he reminds himself of what he was fighting for. But for Merry and Pippin, I guess kind of similar to Frodo, where like it never ended for them.
Yeah, like they couldn't go back and pretend nothing happened, but like they were changed.
Yeah. And so what that meant for them is
nothing would be the same.
But also like kind of accepting power and doing something with that power.
Yeah.
Like a hobbit in Gondor.
Yeah.
Like, come on.
Yeah.
How badass is that?
Yeah.
Like, Bilbo just went to Rivendell and like just like spawed his way to death.
Yeah.
He just lived in a retirement home.
Spawed his way to death. He just melted in the spa water.
The beds are very large. They look very comfy. At least for like a hobbit.
You can jump on them.
Yeah. Like several hobbits can jump on them.
Yeah. They don't break.
It seems very luxurious. But like they, in a similar vein to Bilbo, where it's like, I don't want to end up here. I don't want to die here. I want to die somewhere else. I want to die having gone out again. And so they go to these lands that they fought with, to these people that like they fought alongside and stood beside in the greatest battle that Middle Earth ever knew. So
yeah,
it's sweet.
It's sweet.
It's cathartic for them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's
I don't know what we're going to do after this. Like with my life.
Yeah.
I feel like I've just kind of been like using these as kind of like little markers for looking forward to. And now I've got I guess there's Christmas. If I have to.
And you're gonna watch Scrooged.
Yes, because I love Bill Murray.
I'm gonna watch Scrooge.
Yeah.
Because I love a good musical.
Yeah, which one are you watching?
Scrooge.
I mean, like,
I think
give me a year and an actor.
1971.
Okay.
Albert Finney.
Nice.
Yeah, it's my mom's favorite.
Dude. Scrooge is my mom's favorite.
We're such mama's girls.
I know. My mom's gonna see this too. She's gonna watch this.
Yeah, she's gonna watch this. Hi, Mom.
Hi, Mom.
Yeah, we're gonna watch Scrooge's.
Yeah.
We're gonna we're gonna drink spiced
cider. Yes.
Spiced cider. And we're gonna ring in the Christmas year.
Yeah. Get some holiday mood going.
Yeah, definitely.
With a good old ghost story.
Yeah. I think that's a British thing too.
Oh yeah.
We'll get into that, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Okay.